welcome back to the other side once again. We have Swati with us as we promised in our previous segment, and she'll be taking us through profile building today and the different nitty-gritties that are involved in trying to make your profile more appealing to potential recruiters. So, thanks for joining us once again, Swati.
Of course, it's my pleasure. Nice to be here.
So, at the outset, my first question to you would be what has been your approach to profile building? Has it been different as a student and as a professional, or has it been something consistent? Also, is it something that you thought about consciously? Is it something that struck at some point during your career?
I'll answer the last question first. It is certainly not something that I had in mind during my undergrad. In fact, until the end of my second year, I did not know I needed a resume. So it was only during the internship hunt that I was putting together everything we had done, trying to figure out what was important, what shouldn't be on the resume, etc. So it definitely wasn't something that I had my eyes on consciously. During my master's, it became a lot more obvious that I needed to have a profile and build my story around it. But that's always the way I went about it. It was more organic in the sense I had done a lot of things based on my interests over the years, and it was about trying to figure out what my story was. And I think that's interesting because everything that anybody does is based on their interests, which means there already is a story underneath all of that. So it might take a little bit of time to reflect on it and to figure out what the story is. For me, it was more organic in the sense I was not building my resume or building my profile based on something, but rather it came to a particular position, and then I was figuring out what works best for me.
Mhm.
And in terms of whether it's different as a professional and as a student, I would say it definitely is. As a student, as I said, it's about following your interests because the one thing you can take for granted is that you will keep learning, that you will always keep improving and you will keep learning something or the other, irrespective of how important that is to your final career. As a professional, the aspect that I believe to be most important is the learning. And that's what I'm trying to concentrate on now, which is constantly thinking about what should I be learning next in order to bolster my career or just improve myself in some intangible way that will finally help my career. Because that's one thing that you will completely lose out on as soon as you finish your education in college.
Right. So, could you take us through your profile and explain your different choices and the rationale behind them?
Yeah, most of my undergrad profile was through accidental choices and interests. I joined my university, and as soon as I heard about it, I wanted to join the official college media house, which is called Feeds. And later, I joined the English Literary Society, was involved in sports heavily because of my interests, as well as was doing a lot of managerial work for my department and different fests that we conducted. So that's a bit of how I built my profile through my undergrad. And if you look at my LinkedIn, that's hopefully what I wanted to reflect, the diversity of everything I've done so far. One of the things I point out is to have your primary interests and your primary, what you think will call out for attention on top with your name and your summary. And both these aspects are extremely important because that's what people will look at as soon as they come onto your LinkedIn profile. So I would say make sure you fill those out and make sure it doesn't have to be the buzzwords that your industry demands, but just make sure you're being authentic to yourself and your interest in your story when you write those.
If I may interject, I realize that a lot of your profile, displays a significant amount of diversity because you have experience in product management and writing, as well as a lot of literary events. So, how do you present this diversity in your profile?
For me, how I built my career was based on the diversity of my interests. And it's always been that I've been excited about a jack of all trades approach to life. So if you're giving me a choice to learn something new, I would most likely try it out. And that's how my profile got built on its own. So finally, when it comes to even the job that I'm doing right now, which is product management, it's still in some ways a jack of all trades aspect because as a product manager, you are constantly talking with different teams, aligning everybody on a collaborative goal and working together, which I think is extremely important, towards a goal that fulfills different teams' interests. It could be the sales team you're working with one day and an engineering team you're working with the next. So the fact that you can communicate with these different teams becomes extremely important in this role. And my background in these diverse teams and diverse experiences actually helped me tell that story because, hey, I've worked with teachers as well as worked with students in building a magazine every month. That's something that I think depends a lot on your final interests and your career goal. But I would never, for me, diversity really helped me out in building out what my career was.
Coming to a point that you made in our previous conversation about your summary, what would you recommend that your approach be to your summary?
My first thing is keep it short. People are going to be reading it. It's going to be the first thing that they read when they come onto your LinkedIn. But most people will not press the three dots at the bottom of it. So 2 to 3 lines of what you're doing and why you're where you are, and hopefully some way for them to get more information out of you. So it could be your email address, it could be your website or your portfolio, but something that concisely says this is who I am and this is what my interests are. You could use buzzwords, you need not. That is up to you, but try to be as authentic as possible, because if I'm a recruiter, I'm looking at 40 resumes at the same time. And the more different yours is and the more real yours is, the more it's going to pique their interests.
Right. So, coming to another interesting thing about your profile, we noticed that in your college experience, you've listed your extracurricular activities and co-curricular activities under your college bullet point itself. So, where would you recommend that you put your extracurricular and co-curricular interests? Because some people tend to treat it as professional experience, while some of us aren't sure where it falls.
Yeah, I think it's a judgment call. I would have, in fact, done it both ways. I have most of my college activities under my university, but Feeds, for which I was the co-editor of, actually comes under my experience as well.
Right.
The reason I split it that way is because for me, Feeds was a lot of work and a lot of experience in how to manage a team of 50 people. And when you're putting in 20 hours, 30 hours a week outside of your regular classes in order to build something and actually have a tangible outcome out of it, I think that's a story and an experience that's worth being called a corporate or work experience. But again, that's a very individual call to make. I'm sure there are other aspects that I've put in activities that people would consider work that they want to put into their limelight in their experience. So really about what you want to bring out to the spotlight. And for me, that was one experience over everything else.
That makes a lot of sense because coming out of college, the most time any of us has spent committed to one thing is usually a fest. So it's important to showcase that somewhere.
Yeah, definitely. And for me, I think it's very similar to IIT Madras, where NIT Trichy also has a lot of clubs and a lot of activities that you can be a part of. And you definitely want to make sure that your leadership in these clubs and societies has been recognized, especially if you're right out of college. That's the primary activity that you've done. So definitely make sure you're highlighting it somewhere on your profile. Education is a place to put it, but I would say experience makes a lot of sense if it's a fest or a club that you're heading.
Okay, so coming to one of my final questions, whom should you ideally approach for a recommendation? So you've received one. Is there some way to specifically go about this activity of getting a reference for your profile?
Yeah, I would say a recommendation is important, but it doesn't break your resume if you don't have one. For me, I was lucky enough for my supervisor at my internship to actually ask me if I wanted her to recommend me on LinkedIn, which was perfect because I could say yes, and she wrote down a fantastic recommendation that I couldn't have asked more out of. And if you have a one-on-one connection with somebody you've worked with, especially at a corporate setting, I think it becomes extremely useful to have their words on your profile, because one click and you know her profile and you know her credentials, which are fantastic. So you just add on that reputation into your profile immediately. But again, it doesn't break your resume to not have one listed. Most of us don't have one listed, which is also perfectly fine. If you were to ask somebody, I would say in your undergrad, ask your thesis professor, or any research you've done, ask the professor you've worked under, or if you're interning, ask your supervisor to write one. Most people wouldn't say no. As long as they have a LinkedIn profile, they would most likely do it for you.
Okay, so one final bonus question. What are the things I should be putting in my accomplishments, honors, and awards? Is there any limit to boasting on LinkedIn? Should you be very humble in your attitude towards it?
Well, there's a difference between putting it on your resume and then boasting about it, I would say.
Right.
Because a resume is still something that people are looking for when they come here. So when they're coming onto your page, they typically want to see what you've done outside of your experience in education. So I think it's fine to put it up here. You can pick out the most important awards and honors or the things you feel the proudest of. And it could be something quirky, it could be something totally weird and offbeat, which again will somehow help, and you won't know how it helps until it does. So I wouldn't say restricted based on your education or your experience or what role you want to do. Just pick out the ones that you are you hold closest to your heart, and I think that'll help you out the most. In terms of organizations or courses, I would say prioritize the ones that you want to help out your career.
Yeah, I think that's really sound advice. So thank you, Swati, for joining us for this segment and taking time out of your really busy schedule to be here. So I'm sure this conversation is going to be of immense help to whoever is listening.
Of course, thank you so much for having me, and I'm glad if I'm able to make any difference. We'll be happy to connect with anybody who wants to hear more or just connect outside of this.
So, thank you once again for joining us, and thank you guys for listening. See you next time.
Thank you once again for watching. If you like the video or have any feedback, do let us know in the comments below. For more videos on careers and actionable ideas, please subscribe to The Other Side.